first of all, make sure that you have voicemail available on your phone. Just double check to see what your like greeting sounds like. You're also going to want to do some research on the company. Make sure that you can answer the question, why do you want to work for this company? It's a very common question. And so you need to be able to have something specific to say either about why you like the company's mission, what you like about their products. So when you call and talk to somebody to set up the interview, it's perfectly appropriate to ask about who you'll be interviewing with. And so then if you get a name, you might want to look them up, look at their LinkedIn profile, just kind of get an idea of, who they are, what their career path is. Even sometimes really casual companies, they might have a very casual day-to-day dress policy. But they might expect the candidates coming to interview to dress up a little bit. A good number of companies will structure questions around their mission and values. Your interview is much more than just talking about your skills and your qualifications. It's a lot about fit as well. And I've definitely been on several interviewing committees or interviewing panels where we're not only looking for somebody who can do the job, but we're thinking, okay, this person is going to have to interact with this manager who might be a little bit difficult. The more confident and comfortable you are, the better you can just express who your true self is. And they studied the brain chemistry of people who had done like these big power poses where they made themselves kind of big and large, like you see here, and then ones who had kind of scrunched up. They just found that the people who did the power poses ended up performing better in the interviews. They were rated better by the people who were interviewing them. One little trick, if you have an interview or kind of a high stress situation coming up, is to, in your preparation on your own, maybe do some of these power poses where you're kind of making yourself, big and dominant. The other, maybe more direct way to gain some confidence for your interview is just to practice. Practice. So you can practice in front of the mirror. You can practice with friends and family. You can sign up for an appointment to do a mock interview with one of our career mentors. One other thing I would say is as you are applying to jobs and internships, make sure that you copy and paste the whole position description and save it. Don't just save the link because that link can go dead and disappear. But when you are preparing for your interview, you're probably going to want to look back at what they've written in that position description and remind yourself what they're looking for. Like I said, you want to arrive on time. However, there is such a thing as arriving too early. And it's not a huge deal, but if you want to make the best possible impression, you'll arrive maybe 10 to 15 minutes early. Probably the most common way that they will start an interview is tell me about yourself, or a question kind of like that. Which sounds pretty simple and open, but I think it's so open that sometimes people are just like, I don't even know where to go with that. And they'll start to tell their life story, which is not what they're asking. That's not what you want to do. But basically what they're asking is, why are you here? Like, how are you qualified for this job? And so the way that I like to prepare to answer that question is just to think about, okay, what are maybe my 3 top qualifications, or the 3 things that I want to make sure that they know before this interview is over. A lot of questions are behavioral questions. And the reason why a lot of interviewers ask these questions is that the best indicator of how you're going to do in the future is kind of what you've done in the past. And so they want to hear basically stories. You want to be pretty specific. But basically, your situation and task is you're setting up the context. So what was the situation? Action is what you did. So it's kind of the meat of the answer. And then the key part that a lot of people forget are the results. Employers that have interviewed at BYU, this is some feedback that we got from one of them who said, I think that BYU students could work on their stories a bit more, a real emphasis on the results part of the story and making sure that they're actually answering the question that is asked. Also that their stories can be the best parts of them and don't unnecessarily show weakness. You may not be able to anticipate every question that they're going to ask you, but I would say focusing on some of these areas is a pretty good start to being prepared, along with the more specific kind of skills that I mentioned you'll find in the position description. So a very common question is, tell me about your biggest weakness, tell me about a time you made a mistake. Questions that kind of want you to address those difficult situations or maybe the negative side of things. And the very Old advice was, well, talk about something that's not really a weakness. Say that you're a perfectionist. Say that you work too hard. Nowadays, people just roll their eyes at those kind of answers because it's become almost kind of cliche to respond in that way. So when you're asked to talk maybe about a negative experience or something that doesn't paint you in the best light, be pretty honest and straightforward with that, but that's like 20% of your answer. And then the rest of your answer is talking about, what did you do differently the next time? How did you correct your mistake? What have you learned from that? Sometimes they might ask a question and you just don't know. So if it's more of like a skill-based or a fact-based question and you don't know, just admit that you don't know. It would be great to go into an interview and say, I really haven't spent a lot of time doing that in my coursework, but I know that I could, take this free online course over the summer to get better at it. If it's more of like they say, tell me about a time when, and it's just like, well, that's never happened to me. But if you can kind of think to yourself, what is it that they're trying to learn about me? If you can kind of identify that and tell of a similar but different experience that does try to answer that question, that might be a great way to address that as well. And then they will often ask, usually at the end of the interview, but sometimes throughout, like, do you have any questions for me? And there is a right and a wrong answer to this, and it's yes. If you just kind of say, no, you risk looking not very interested in the job, but just make sure that you are taking an interest in asking some good questions along the way. You want to ask questions that show like your interest in the job and help you kind of learn about what it would look like for you to work there. One thing to be aware of is that it is illegal for employers to make hiring decisions based on a number of protected classes. So things like gender, ethnicity, religion, disability, in some states, sexual orientation. So there are a number of protected classes that would influence their opinion of you, and that is illegal. So just, be aware that if you get questions like that, it's okay to kind of push back. Okay, video and phone interviews. Have a good space. If you don't have a good space for like a Zoom interview, we do have our interview rooms on campus in career services that students can book. And so you've got that as an option if you need it. Dressing up can maybe help you to act a little bit more professional. One of the benefits of a phone interview is that you can have some notes in front of you. After the interview, it's always good to say a thank you note. Send a thank you note. So reference something from the interview. I personally am of the opinion that in this case, email is best because sometimes these decisions are made pretty quickly. And so you want to make sure that they get that email. Give yourself at least an hour before you send that email, and then up to maybe like 24 hours would be ideal. So just some key takeaways. The way that you present yourself is just as important as what you say. I mentioned that several times. It's a cultural fit, not just a qualifications fit. So practice so that you can be yourself. Be friendly, be interested in your body language. Make sure that's communicating interest, and then the types of questions that you're asking is another key way to demonstrate your interest. Your goal in an interview is to communicate how you can add value, not just talk about what you've done in the past. Practice, practice, practice is probably the absolute best thing that you can do. And then send a thank you note. Usually if you do want to know about time off or kind of like where you'll be sitting or like benefits type stuff like that, the best time to ask that is once they call to offer you the position. And then that's when you kind of start to gather information about, salary and benefits, and you can ask, for, time off or other types of accommodations that you might need.